I didn't realize you could be erased without a fight, until my own mother typed one sentence in our family group chat. Mother's Day dinner, successful kids only. And somehow, the most shocking part wasn't the words. It was the silence that followed. Why would a mother proudly celebrate her children and deliberately leave one out? My name is Sarah Hayes. I'm 25 years old, and I live in Riverton, Ohio, one of those small towns where everyone knows your last name, your business, and your mistakes before you even get the chance to explain them. I work the night shift at a frozen food factory on the edge of town. It's not glamorous. It's not something people post about with a filter and a motivational quote. But it's real work. It's the kind of work that keeps lights on and mortgages paid and families afloat when life collapses. And for years, it also made me the embarrassing one in my family. I'm telling you this like I'm writing it down for my future self, because there are certain moments in your life you don't want to rewrite in your head until they turn into something softer. Some moments deserve to stay sharp, because they teach you what you were willing to tolerate and what you finally stopped tolerating. I never planned to be the daughter who stayed behind. When my friends left Riverton, they left with suitcases and college brochures and plans. They left for places with bigger streets, brighter futures, and names that sounded like opportunity. I stayed. Not because I didn't want more, but because someone had to be the one who didn't run when things got hard. My dad died when I was 22. It happened fast, the way it always does in stories you don't expect to become yours. One day he was complaining about his back and saying he'd go to the doctor next week. The next day, he was gone, and our living room filled with casseroles, sympathy cards, and people who kept saying, "If you need anything." What they meant was, "If you need anything that doesn't actually inconvenience me." My mom, Janet Hayes, didn't fall apart the way you'd expect. She became efficient, cold in a way that looked like strength from the outside. She made calls, handled paperwork, nodded through condolences. She cried in the bathroom once, and then she stopped crying where anyone could see. After the funeral, the real grief showed up. Not in tears, but in bills. The mortgage didn't care that my dad was dead. The bank didn't pause out of respect. The electricity company didn't send a sympathy bouquet. Everything kept coming, month after month, like a machine that didn't know how to stop. My older siblings were already gone by then. Mark, my oldest brother, was in medical school. The golden child. The one my mom talked about like he was a trophy she personally crafted. Emma, my sister, had moved to Columbus and was working her way up in a marketing firm. She wore blazers and posted pictures of rooftop bars and captioned them with words like grind and blessed. And Lily, my youngest sister, was the family's future straight-A student, debate team, the one everyone said would go far. I was the only one still in Riverton. So, I did what made sense at the time. I took a job at the frozen food plant. Full-time, nights, overtime whenever they offered it. I told myself it would be temporary, just until we got stable, just until my mom figured things out, just until the world stopped feeling like it was tipping over. That's what I told myself. The truth was, I didn't just stay for the money. I stayed because someone had to. The factory wasn't a dream. It was a building that smelled like garlic powder, cold metal, and the kind of spice that clings to your clothes no matter how many times you wash them. It was fluorescent lights and steel-toe boots, and the constant hum of machines that never got tired, even when I did. I'd come home at sunrise with my shoulders aching, hands stiff from the cold, hair tucked under a cap, and my skin smelling faintly like freezer burn. But I paid the bills. I kept the house from being taken. I made sure my mom didn't have to choose between groceries and heat. And somehow, none of that counted. Not to her. To my mom, my job meant one thing: failure. She never said it in those exact words. She didn't have to. She had a talent for humiliation that didn't look like cruelty on the surface. It looked like jokes, like concern, like sighs at the right moment, like she was mourning the daughter she wished she had. I remember one family barbecue about 2 years after my dad died. It was one of those summer gatherings where everyone's holding paper plates and pretending they're not comparing lives. The kind where people ask questions that sound innocent but are actually traps. An aunt I barely knew smiled at me and said, "So, Sarah, what are you doing these days?" Before I could even answer, my mom laughed. Not a warm laugh, not a proud laugh. A laugh that said, "Don't take her seriously." "Oh, Sarah's taking some time to figure herself out," she said, waving her hand like I was a small inconvenience. "She's just helping out at a local place for now." A local place. She couldn't even say the word factory. I stood there holding a cup of lukewarm lemonade, feeling like I was shrinking in front of everyone. I tried to explain. I tried to say, "I'm working nights. I'm doing overtime. I'm paying for—" My mom pulled me aside like I was a child misbehaving. Her voice dropped into that sharp whisper that always felt worse than yelling. "Why can't you be more like your siblings?" she hissed. "This job is embarrassing. People are going to think we raised you with no ambition." I remember blinking at her, stunned, because I wanted to ask her something so badly my throat burned. "Do you think the mortgage pays itself?" But I didn't say it. I swallowed it, like I swallowed everything. That's what I did in my family. I swallowed discomfort so everyone else could stay comfortable. I swallowed humiliation so the family image stayed smooth. I swallowed my own anger until it turned into something quiet and heavy inside me. And for a long time, I told myself it was worth it. Because she was my mom. Because she was grieving too. Because families go through phases. Because maybe, if I worked hard enough, if I proved myself enough, she would eventually look at me and see something other than a disappointment in steel-toe boots. I didn't realize that the more I tried to earn her approval, the more she treated it like something I didn't deserve. And then Mother's Day came. Mother's Day in Riverton always smelled like cut grass and cheap supermarket flowers. Every store had pink balloons. Every church sign had some quote about mothers being angels. People posted pictures of brunch plates and smiling families. At the factory, it smelled like frozen onions and bleach. I was on break, sitting behind the loading dock on an overturned crate, scrolling through my phone with numb fingers. The wind was cold enough to bite, even in May. My boots were dusted with flour and salt from the packaging line. I told myself I didn't care if my family texted me that day. I lead. My phone lit up. Hayes family group chat. For a second, my chest tightened with something stupidly hopeful. I imagined my mom sending one of those messages that ends with, "I love all my kids." I imagined her saying something like, "Happy Mother's Day to me. I'm grateful for all of you." I imagined her, just once, including me, without making it feel like charity. I opened the message. And there it was. A long, carefully written text about dinner plans, and how proud she was. But the pride wasn't for all of us. It was for them. She wrote Mark's name with his title, Dr. Hayes. She praised Emma like she was already a CEO. She talked about Lily like she was a future judge. And then she said, "Dinner at 6:30. Successful kids only. Can't wait to celebrate you." She tagged 3 names. Mark, Emma, Lily. My name wasn't anywhere. Not in the message. Not in a follow-up. Not even in a pity heart emoji. Just gone. And as I stared at that screen, something inside me didn't just hurt. It recognized the truth. This wasn't an accident. This was an announcement. And the worst part was, I already knew what was coming next. Because once you've been the family's invisible child long enough, you can predict the script. If I said I was hurt, I'd be called dramatic. If I stayed quiet, I'd be expected to swallow it. If I pulled away, I'd be called ungrateful. Either way, I would be the problem. And sitting there behind that loading dock, with my hands numb from the cold and my heart pounding like it wanted to escape my chest, I realized something that changed everything. For the first time in my life, I didn't ask myself, how do I make her proud? I asked myself, why have I been trying to make someone proud who's determined to be ashamed of me? And that was the moment the old version of me started to disappear. I stared at my phone so long my break timer ran out twice. The factory air behind the loading dock was sharp and cold, the kind of cold that makes your lungs feel too big for your chest. Somewhere inside, the machines kept humming, the conveyor belts kept moving, and the world kept doing what it always did, acting like nothing had happened. But something had happened. My mother had written me out of my own family with one sentence. I kept reading it again and again, like my eyes were going to catch a hidden line the way you catch a typo in a paper. Like maybe I'd missed the part where she added, "And Sarah too." Like maybe my name was there and I was just too upset to see it. It wasn't. There were only 3 names. 3 shining stars. 3 kids worth celebrating. And then, the reactions started popping up under her message. One by one, like little fireworks meant for someone else. Mark sent a flexed bicep emoji. Emma replied with sparkles and a heart. Lily wrote, "Can't wait, Mom. Love you." I refreshed the chat. I waited. I held my breath like a fool, hoping one of them would say, "Hey, what about Sarah?" Nothing. No typing bubble. No awkward pause. No moment of discomfort. Just acceptance. That was when I realized something that hurt worse than the text itself. My mom wasn't the only one who didn't see me. My siblings had been trained to look right through me, too. I felt my throat tighten, that hot sting behind my eyes that always comes when you're trying not to cry in public. Crying at work is humiliating in a way that feels almost primal, like you're breaking some rule of survival. I turned my face toward the brick wall and swallowed hard until the tears backed off. The wind whipped around the corner of the building, carrying the smell of frozen onions and industrial sanitizer. My fingers were numb from the cold and from gripping my phone too tightly. Then my screen lit up again. Mom was calling. A video call. Her smiling contact photo filled the top of the screen. She looked warm in it, soft. Like the kind of mother you'd want. Like the kind of mother who would never write, "successful kids only," and forget she had 4 children. The call rang. And rang. And I just watched it. Because I knew what would happen if I answered. She'd tilt her head and put on that concerned voice. The one that sounded like love but always carried a warning underneath. She'd say, "Sweetheart, don't make this a thing." She'd say, "You know I didn't mean it like that." She'd say, "Why are you always so sensitive?" And if I dared to cry, she'd get impatient. If I dared to get angry, she'd get offended. If I dared to tell her she hurt me, she'd somehow make it about how much I was hurting her. That was her gift. Turning my pain into a problem she could blame on me. So I let it ring until it timed out. The second it stopped, a text came through. From her, "Hope you understand. Tonight is just about celebrating achievements. You know you're always part of the family. Always part of the family. Just not part of the story she wanted to tell." I stared at that sentence, and something in me went very still. It wasn't rage, not yet. It was something colder. Something that felt like the moment you realize you've been holding your breath for years without noticing. Something that felt like clarity. Because she hadn't forgotten me. If she had forgotten me, she wouldn't have called. She wouldn't have followed up. She wouldn't have explained. She knew exactly what she was doing. She was drawing a line between the children she could brag about and the one she couldn't. And she wanted me to accept it quietly so she could keep pretending she was a good mother. I slipped my phone into my pocket like I was burying something. When the brake horn sounded, I stood up and walked back inside. The fluorescent lights hit my eyes too hard. The floor was slick and cold. The air inside the plant was even colder than outside. And the noise swallowed me whole: fans, motors, the constant clatter of plastic crates. My coworkers moved like they always did, focused on the line, focused on making it through another shift. I took my spot and put my gloves back on. My hands started working automatically, muscle memory doing what it had done for years. Grab, stack, seal, slide. Grab, stack, seal, slide. But my mind wasn't there. My mind was still behind that loading dock, staring at a screen where my name didn't exist. For the rest of the shift, I felt like I was floating slightly outside my body, like I was watching myself from a distance. Every time I blinked, I saw the words again. "Successful kids only." The sentence replayed in my head like a cruel little jingle. And the worst part was, the more I replayed it, the more I started remembering other moments I'd forced myself to forget. The barbecue where she laughed. The way she introduced me to her church friends as, "Sarah, she's still figuring things out." The way she always made sure to mention Mark's title. The way she framed Emma's graduation photo in the living room and placed Lily's honor roll certificate right beside it. The way she never framed anything about me, because there was nothing she considered frameworthy. I thought about the nights I'd stayed late at the factory so she could keep the house. I thought about the times I'd handed her money without telling my siblings because I didn't want them to feel pressured. I thought about the way I'd become the quiet support beam holding up a roof that nobody thanked. And suddenly, it wasn't just the Mother's Day text that hurt. It was the realization that I had been trying to earn love from someone who treated love like a reward system. I got off work just before sunrise. The sky was a pale gray, the kind of color that looks exhausted. I drove home with the radio off, the road empty, my hands tight on the steering wheel. When I got to my studio apartment, I didn't even take my shoes off right away. I just stood there, in the middle of the room, listening to the silence. My phone buzzed again. More messages. This time, the family group chat was filling up with photos. My mom, at dinner, smiling between Mark and Emma like she'd won something. Mark in his white coat, even though it wasn't a hospital. Because of course he wore it. Emma in a sleek blazer, holding a wine glass. Lily in a floral dress, laughing. Captions underneath. Mom deserves the best. So proud of this family. And then, my mom commented under one of them, like she was writing a caption for a magazine cover. My 3 shining stars. 3. I stared at the screen until my vision blurred. And I realized something else. She wasn't leaving me out because she didn't love me. She was leaving me out because she loved what my siblings gave her, more than she loved who I was. She loved the way they made her look. She loved the status. She loved the story. And I didn't fit. My phone buzzed again. A private message from Mark. Hey, heard you were busy yesterday. Mom was a little hurt. You know she didn't mean it that way. Don't make everything so dramatic. A minute later, Emma. Next year, just show up more with your career stuff, and she'll include you. You know how she is. I read those texts slowly, like I was trying to understand a language I'd spoken my whole life without realizing how toxic it was. Not one of them asked if I was okay. Not one of them said, "That was messed up." Not one of them said, "Mom, you can't do that." They didn't see her cruelty as the problem. They saw my reaction as the problem. And in that moment, something inside me hardened into a decision. I opened the group chat again. I scrolled back up to my mom's Mother's Day message. I stared at it for a long time. Then I took a screenshot. I saved it in a locked album on my phone, the kind that requires a passcode, not because I wanted to obsess over it, but because I needed proof. Proof that this happened. Proof that I wasn't imagining it. Proof that I wasn't too sensitive. Proof that I wasn't dramatic. A receipt of the moment my place in the family was made official. Optional. Then I muted the group chat. 1 year. The silence that followed was immediate, like someone had turned off a radio that had been playing in the background of my life for too long. I opened my mom's contact. My thumb hovered over her name. I hesitated for one heartbeat, because even when someone hurts you, your body still remembers the version of them you once loved, the version you wanted them to be, the version you keep hoping will come back. Then I hit block. The phone asked, "Are you sure?" For once, I didn't second-guess myself. I blocked her. I blocked Mark. I blocked Emma. And when I got to Lily's name, I stopped. Lily was my baby sister. The one who used to crawl into my bed when she had nightmares. The one who used to beg me to braid her hair before school. The one who had grown up watching this family dynamic like it was normal. She hadn't defended me, but I wasn't ready to believe she was beyond reaching. So I left her unblocked. I set my phone down on the kitchen counter and stared at it like it was a grenade I'd just disarmed. My hands were shaking. My heart was racing. And yet, underneath all of it, there was a strange, unfamiliar feeling creeping in. Not happiness. Not relief. Not peace. But something close. Something like the first breath after being underwater too long. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting to be chosen. I was choosing myself. And I didn't know it yet, but that quiet choice was about to change everything. The next morning, I woke up at 4:30 a.m. Like I always did. The alarm on my phone blared that same ugly sound, and for a second, my body moved on instinct reach. Silence it. Sit up. Swing my legs over the edge of the bed. Start the day. That was my routine. That was who I'd been for years. The daughter who got up, went to work, carried the weight, and tried not to complain. But this time, when I sat up, I didn't feel that familiar pressure in my chest. I didn't feel the usual panic of, how do I keep everyone afloat? How do I make her proud? Instead, I felt something strange. Stillness. Like my brain had finally stopped running in circles. I stared at the dim light coming through my blinds, and the first thought that entered my head wasn't about overtime or bills or my mom's approval. It was a question. Why did I let her have that much power over me? That question sat there quietly, like it had been waiting for me to finally ask it. I went through my morning routine on autopilot. Shower, coffee, hair pulled back, work clothes, steel-toe boots, the same uniform I'd worn 1,000 times. The uniform my mom hated. The uniform she treated like proof that I wasn't worth bragging about. I grabbed my lunch bag, checked my phone out of habit, and saw the silence I had created. No group chat notifications. No texts from my mom. No passive-aggressive reminders from Mark. No sparkle emojis from Emma. Just nothing. For a second, my stomach tightened. Because even when your family hurts you, their noise becomes familiar. And when it disappears, your nervous system doesn't immediately recognize it as peace. Sometimes, it recognizes it as danger. But then I took a slow breath, and I reminded myself of what I'd done. I hadn't done something cruel. I'd done something necessary. I drove to the factory in the early dark. The roads mostly empty. The sky still black like the day hadn't decided whether it wanted to show up. The plant lights glowed in the distance, harsh and white, like a giant freezer humming in the middle of nowhere. Inside, everything was the same. The smell, the noise, the cold, the way my coworkers moved with tired efficiency. People nodded at me, made small talk, complained about the coffee machine like nothing in the world had changed. And in a way, nothing had. The world didn't care about my family drama. The production line didn't pause for heartbreak. The boxes still needed to be stacked. The pallets still needed to be wrapped. The shift still needed to get through. But something had changed. Me. I didn't realize how much energy I'd spent managing my family's emotions until I didn't have to anymore. I didn't have to anticipate my mom's mood. I didn't have to prepare for Mark's condescension. I didn't have to brace myself for Emma's subtle little jabs. All I had to do was my job. And weirdly, I did it better. During my first break, I sat in the break room with my coffee and my sandwich, and for the first time in years, I wasn't scrolling through my phone waiting for someone to hurt me. I just ate. I watched my coworkers laugh about something stupid. I listened to the vending machine rattle. I stared at the bulletin board covered in safety reminders and random flyers. There was a poster about tuition reimbursement. I'd seen it before, 100 times. It had always been background noise. But that day, my eyes landed on it like it was the only thing in the room. Advance your career. Technical courses available. Tuition support for employees. I stared at the words, and I felt a spark of something that surprised me. Not ambition for my mom. Ambition for me. The thought made my throat tighten in a different way. Because I realized I'd been living my life like it was a punishment I had to serve until I earned the right to want more. And maybe I didn't have to earn it. Maybe I could just take it. When I got home after my shift, I didn't collapse into bed like I usually did. I sat at my small kitchen table with a notebook and a pen, the same table where I paid bills, the same table where I ate ramen and watched TV alone, the same table where I'd told myself I was fine. I opened the notebook and wrote 2 columns at the top of a clean page. Stay connected. Cut ties. It felt dramatic. It felt like something people do in movies when they're trying to be edgy. I almost laughed at myself. But then I started writing. Under Stay Connected, I wrote, holidays with family. Maybe she'll accept me someday. Not being the bad daughter. Not feeling alone. Then I paused. My pen hovered over the page. Because even as I wrote those things, I could feel how thin they were, how much they depended on someone else changing, how much they depended on me continuing to shrink so my mom could keep feeling tall. Then I wrote under Cut Ties. No more humiliation. No more waiting for an invitation that never comes. Space to build a life on my terms. Peace. No more being erased. The right side filled up faster than the left. That should have been my answer right there. But my hand still hovered. Because cutting off your own mother doesn't feel like a normal decision. It feels like you're breaking some invisible law of nature. Like you're doing something unforgivable. That's what people like my mom rely on. They rely on the fact that you'll feel guilty no matter what they do. My phone buzzed on the table, making me flinch. Even though I had muted the group chat, I still got a notification from Lily. She hadn't been blocked. She was the only thread still open. I looked at the message. It wasn't from Lily directly. It was a screenshot. A photo from the Mother's Day dinner. My mom smiling, her arms around Mark and Emma, Lily leaning in beside them. All of them glowing like a magazine cover. And underneath it, my mom's caption. My 3 shining stars. Lily had sent it with one line. I'm sorry. That was it. 2 words. No explanation, no defense. No, but she didn't mean it. Just, I'm sorry. And I swear, those words hit harder than everything else. Because it was the first time anyone in my family had acknowledged what was happening without trying to spin it. I stared at Lily's message until my eyes burned. Then I typed back. It's okay. I deleted it. I typed again. It's not your fault. I deleted it too. Because none of those were true. It wasn't okay. And it wasn't her fault. But it was her responsibility to see it. To not become like them. So instead, I wrote, thank you for seeing it. A minute later, Lily replied, I wanted to say something in the group chat. Mark told me not to stir things up. He said you were just being sensitive. There it was. Mark had been controlling the narrative. Managing the family image. Training Lily to be quiet, too. I didn't respond. I set my phone face down and stared at my notebook again. Stay connected. Cut ties. I thought about my dad. I thought about how he used to squeeze my shoulder when my mom got sharp, like he was silently apologizing for her. I thought about the way he used to say, your mom just wants the best. And I wondered what he would say now. Would he tell me to keep swallowing it? Or would he tell me I'd done enough? My eyes drifted to the screenshot in my locked album, the one I'd saved like evidence. Successful kids only. The words felt like a door slamming. And suddenly, I knew. I didn't want to stay connected to a family that only saw me when I was useful. I didn't want to keep auditioning for love. I didn't want to keep working myself into the ground just to be treated like a secret. I wanted to be done, not in a dramatic way. Not in a revenge montage. Just done. My hands were shaking as I reached for my phone. I went to my mom's conversation first, even though she was already blocked. I stared at her name, at the little circle of her smiling face. My chest tightened with that old reflex. The reflex that said, she's your mom, don't do this, you'll regret it. Then another reflex spoke up, quieter but stronger. She already did it. She already chose. I opened my settings and made sure her number was blocked. Then I went to Mark. Blocked. Emma. Blocked. I didn't feel satisfaction. I felt nausea. I felt grief. I felt like I was stepping off a cliff and hoping there was ground on the other side. Then I did one more thing. I opened the family group chat and scrolled up one last time. I took one more screenshot this time of the whole message thread. The original, successful kids only text, and the reactions underneath it. Mark's flex. Emma's sparkles. Lily's can't wait, Mom. All of it. I saved it beside the first one. Not because I wanted to punish them, but because I knew myself. I knew there would be nights in the future where guilt would creep in and whisper, maybe it wasn't that bad. Maybe you overreacted. I needed proof for that version of me. Then I muted the group chat again. 1 year, and I set my phone down. The silence that followed felt like standing in a room after someone stops screaming. Your ears keep ringing, but you realize the screaming is gone. I sat there for a long time, staring at my notebook. Finally, at the bottom of the right column, I wrote in all caps, I choose me. A knock came at my door about an hour later. I hadn't told anyone what I'd done. But Mia, my coworker and friend, had a sixth sense for when I was falling apart. She walked in holding a plastic bag of takeout, like she was bringing emergency supplies. You look like you got hit by a truck, she said. I tried to laugh. It came out shaky. Mia sat across from me at the table, and looked at the notebook. "What's that?" she asked. I slid it toward her without speaking. She read both columns slowly. Then she looked up at me, her eyes steady. "You already know your answer, Sarah," she said softly. "You wrote it." My throat tightened. "Am I a terrible person?" I whispered. Mia didn't even blink. "No," she said. "You're a person who finally got tired of being treated like an option." I stared at her, and for the first time since Mother's Day, I felt something break open. Not in a painful way, in a freeing way. Because hearing someone else say it out loud made it real, made it allowed. Mia reached across the table and tapped the words, "I choose me," with her finger. "Good," she said. "Now don't backpedal." I nodded, even though my eyes were wet, because the truth was, I didn't know what would happen next. I didn't know if my mom would explode or pretend nothing happened. I didn't know if my siblings would blame me or ignore me. I didn't know if I would wake up tomorrow drowning in guilt. But I knew one thing with absolute clarity. For the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting to be invited. I had walked away from the table. And somehow, the world still kept turning, and so did I. Once I muted the group chat and blocked my mom, my life didn't become magically perfect. It didn't turn into one of those clean, inspiring montages where you cut toxic people off and suddenly your skin clears, your bank account grows, and you start jogging at sunrise with a new playlist and a new identity. The truth was, the first few days felt weird. Not empty, just quiet. So quiet it made me uncomfortable. I hadn't realized how much noise my family created in my head until it stopped. Even when they weren't texting, I was still thinking about what they would say. I was still anticipating my mom's disappointment, like it was a weather forecast I had to check before stepping outside. Now there was no forecast. There was just me. And for a while, that felt like standing in a room after the power goes out. You don't know where to put your hands. You don't know what to do with yourself. You keep reaching for a switch that isn't there. The first Sunday after Mother's Day, I woke up and instinctively reached for my phone to see if there were any new messages. There weren't. Of course there weren't. I had made sure of that. Still, my stomach twisted like I'd forgotten something important, like I was supposed to be somewhere, like I was failing at being a daughter. I lay there, staring at the ceiling of my studio apartment, listening to the distant sound of traffic and the soft hum of my fridge, and I realized something that made my throat tighten. My whole life, I had been trained to believe that peace was suspicious. If things were calm, it meant something bad was coming. If my mom wasn't criticizing me, it meant she was saving it up. If my family wasn't asking something from me, it meant they were about to. That was the kind of nervous system you develop when love comes with conditions. So I got up, made coffee, and sat at my tiny kitchen table with my notebook open, the one with the 2 columns. Stay connected. Cut ties. At the bottom of the right column, the words "I choose me" were still written in thick ink like a dare. I stared at them and whispered, "Okay." Not dramatically, not triumphantly, just, "Okay." Because choosing yourself isn't one decision. It's 100 small ones. And the first small one I made that day was this. I wasn't going to fill the silence by crawling back. I wasn't going to send a message just to prove I was mature. I wasn't going to apologize for being hurt. I wasn't going to do what I always did, which was smooth everything over so my mom could keep pretending she wasn't cruel. Instead, I got dressed, put on my boots, and went to work. The factory became my anchor, in a way it never had before. Not because I loved it, but because it was the one place where nobody expected me to perform a version of myself that made them look good. At the plant, people didn't care about my last name or my family's reputation. They cared if I showed up. They cared if I worked hard. They cared if I pulled my weight. And I did. The days started to stack up. One shift turned into a week. A week turned into a month. And slowly, the guilt started to change shape. It didn't disappear, but it got quieter. It stopped feeling like a siren and started feeling like background static. I still had moments, especially late at night when I got home and everything was dark and my apartment felt too small. I'd sit on my couch and catch myself thinking about my mom. I'd wonder what she was telling people. I'd wonder if she was angry. I'd wonder if she missed me. And then I'd remember her text. Successful kids only. And I'd remember that she didn't miss me when I was the one keeping the mortgage paid. She missed me when I made her life easier. That realization was like swallowing something bitter, but it kept me grounded. One afternoon, about 2 weeks after I cut them off, my manager called me into her office. Her name was Rachel Turner, and she was the kind of woman who could stare down a machine malfunction and a screaming employee in the same 5 minutes without raising her voice. She was tough, but fair. The kind of boss you respect even when she's correcting you. I thought I was in trouble. I sat down across from her, hands folded in my lap, bracing myself. Rachel leaned back in her chair and studied me for a second. "You've been different lately," she said. My stomach dropped. Different. That word felt dangerous. In my family, being different was always punished. I forced a small smile. "Different how?" Rachel shrugged, sharper, more focused. "Like you're not carrying something you used to carry." I blinked, caught off guard. Then she slid a paper across her desk. It was a flyer. Riverton Technical College. Industrial Safety Certification. Process Improvement. Basic Engineering Concepts. Evening Classes. "We have tuition reimbursement," Rachel said. "Most people don't use it because they think they're not the type. But you've got the brain for it. And I've watched you run circles around people who've been here 10 years longer than you." My throat tightened. For a second, I didn't know what to say. Because the truth was, nobody in my family had ever spoken to me like that. Not once. They talked about my potential like it was something I'd wasted. Rachel talked about it like it was something I could still build. "You're serious?" I asked. Rachel nodded. "If you want it, I can't make you take it. But I can tell you this. You don't belong on the line forever. Not because line work is beneath you, but because you're capable of more." I walked out of her office with that flyer in my hand like it was a fragile thing. And for the first time in a long time, my future didn't feel like something I had to beg for permission to want. It felt possible. That night, I sat at my kitchen table again and filled out the enrollment form online. My fingers hovered over the keyboard for a second, and I could hear my mom's voice in my head, sharp and dismissive. "Why bother? You'll just quit. You're not like your siblings." Then I heard Mia's voice, steadier. "You wrote your answer." I clicked submit. The first day of class, I almost didn't go. Not because I didn't want to, but because fear has a funny way of disguising itself as logic. I told myself I was too tired. I told myself I couldn't afford the time. I told myself it would be embarrassing to walk into a classroom at 25 wearing factory boots while everyone else looked like they belonged. Then I remembered the way my mom had erased me, and I realized something. If I didn't go, she would win without even knowing she won. So I went. The campus was small, the kind of place with old brick buildings and fluorescent hallways that smelled like dry erase markers and burnt coffee. The classroom had those cheap desks with attached chairs, the kind that always wobble. I sat in the back at first, shoulders tense, pretending I didn't care. Then the instructor started talking about safety systems, about process flow, about how small changes in a line could prevent injuries and improve efficiency. And something in my brain lit up. I wasn't just listening. I was understanding. I was connecting it to what I did every night at work. The way machines jammed. The way certain employees got hurt because management didn't think through the process. The way the line could be improved if anyone bothered to ask the people who actually worked it. Halfway through the lecture, without thinking, I raised my hand. The instructor looked at me. "Yes?" I asked a question. A real one. A smart one. And the instructor nodded like I belonged there. That moment was small, but it hit me like a wave, because it was the first time I felt proud of myself without immediately imagining how I could translate it into something my mom would approve of. I didn't think, "I can't wait to tell her." I thought, "I can't believe I almost talked myself out of this." After class, I walked out into the parking lot with my notebook tucked under my arm, the night air cool against my face. My phone buzzed. For a split second, my heart jumped, expecting some new family drama, but it wasn't them. It was Mia. "Where are you?" she texted. "I'm leaving class," I replied. "Class?" she wrote back. Then a second later, Proud of you. Coffee tomorrow. I smiled at my screen. It wasn't a big smile. It was the kind of smile you get when something inside you finally unclenches. Over the next few weeks, my life started to fill up in a way it hadn't before. Work, class, coffee with Mia, studying at my kitchen table, falling asleep with textbooks open beside me, waking up with pen marks on my hand. I was tired, but it was a different kind of tired. Not the tired of being drained. The tired of building something. And slowly, the identity my family had assigned me, the embarrassing daughter, the one who stayed behind, the one who didn't make it, started to crack. Because every day, I was proving something to myself. Not that I was worthy of their pride, but that I had never been unworthy in the first place. One night, as I was walking into the college building with a stack of worksheets in my arms, I heard a voice behind me. Soft, hesitant. Sarah? I froze, because I knew that voice. And I knew, before I even turned around, that whatever piece I'd been building was about to be tested. I turned, and there, by the bulletin board, stood my sister, Lily. Her hair was pulled into a messy bun, her backpack clutched tight against her chest like a shield. Her eyes were wide, and she looked like she'd been holding her breath. For a second, it felt like the air left my lungs. It felt like being punched and hugged at the same time. And as I stared at her in that hallway, I realized something else, too. My quiet disappearance hadn't just changed my life, it had started changing theirs. And my mom had no idea what she'd set in motion. For a second, I just stood there in the hallway like my feet had forgotten how to work. The college building smelled like dry erase markers and old carpet, and the fluorescent lights above us buzzed softly, like they were trying to pretend nothing dramatic was happening. Students walked past us in hoodies and headphones, carrying coffee cups and textbooks, completely unaware that my entire past had just stepped into my present. Lily was standing by the bulletin board, clutching her backpack straps so tightly her knuckles looked pale. Her hair was pulled into a messy bun, and she was wearing a college hoodie that didn't match the version of her my mom liked to show off, the polished, perfect, future lawyer version. She looked nervous. She looked human. And the strangest part was, she looked relieved to see me. Sarah, she said again, quieter this time, like she wasn't sure I was real. I swallowed. My throat felt tight, like I'd been holding a scream inside it for months. Lily, I managed. We stared at each other for a beat too long. In that pause, 100 memories flashed through my mind. Lily at 10 years old begging me to braid her hair. Lily crying because she'd lost a debate tournament. Lily curled up beside me on the couch watching movies while Mom talked on the phone about Mark's grades. My baby sister. The one person in that family I still hadn't blocked. She shifted her weight and glanced down the hallway, like she was afraid someone might see her talking to me. Then she blurted out, "I didn't know you were taking classes here." I let out a breath that sounded like a laugh but didn't feel like one. "I didn't know you were either," I said. Her cheeks flushed. "Mom doesn't know." That sentence landed like a stone. I blinked. "She doesn't know you're here?" Lily shook her head quickly. "She thinks I'm still, doing the pre-law track stuff, internships, the whole plan." She swallowed. "But I didn't want to be there tonight." I stared at her. "Tonight?" She hesitated, then said it like she was ripping off a bandage. "They're having another dinner, like a makeup thing. Mom's been weird since Mother's Day. Mark's in town again, Emma's coming, and Mom keeps saying she wants the family to look normal again." Normal. I felt my mouth twist. Lily looked at me carefully, like she was trying to read my face. "I saw the message," she said softly. I didn't answer right away. Because hearing someone else say it out loud made it real in a way that hurt. Like when you bruise your knee and you can ignore it until someone touches it. Lily took a step closer. "I wanted to say something. I really did. But Mark told you not to stir things up." I finished for her. Her eyes widened. "How did you?" "Because he always does," I said. My voice was calm, but it felt like glass. "Mark doesn't protect people. He protects the image." Lily's face crumpled slightly, like she hated how true that was. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm really, really sorry." Her apology hit me in a place I wasn't prepared for. Not because it fixed anything, Not because it erased what happened, but because it was the first time anyone in my family had apologized without adding a but. No excuse. No, you're too sensitive. No, Mom didn't mean it. Just, I'm sorry. I swallowed hard. It wasn't your job to fix it, I said, and I meant it. You were the kid. You still are. Lily nodded, eyes shining. She wiped at them quickly like she didn't want to cry in public. We stood there awkwardly, two sisters in a hallway, holding years of unspoken pain between us like a heavy box. Finally, I gestured toward a bench along the wall. Sit, I said. She sat immediately, like she'd been waiting for permission. I sat beside her, leaving a few inches of space between us, even though part of me wanted to grab her hand. I didn't know what I was allowed to do anymore. I didn't know what kind of sister I was now. The hallway was quiet, except for the distant sound of a door closing somewhere and the soft squeak of sneakers on tile. Lily stared at her hands. Mom's been bringing you up, she said. My stomach tightened. In a good way? Lily made a face. No. Of course not. She keeps saying you're overreacting, Lily continued, voice low. She keeps saying you embarrassed her by disappearing, like you made her look like a bad mom. I let out a short, humorless laugh. Well, if the shoe fits, Lily gave me a sad smile. She's not even mad that you're hurt. She's mad that people noticed. That sentence was so blunt, so honest, it almost made me dizzy, because it confirmed something I'd suspected for years but never wanted to say out loud. My mom didn't measure love in feelings. She measured it in optics. Lily twisted the strap of her backpack. People at church keep asking where you are. Mrs. Donnelly asked if you moved away. Mom told her you're working a lot. I could picture it so clearly. My mom standing in the church lobby with her perfect smile, dodging questions like she dodged the word factory. What did she tell them? I asked. Lily hesitated. Different things. Depends on who's asking. My chest tightened. So even my absence had become something she had to manage, like PR. Lily took a breath. She's embarrassed, Sarah, but she'll never admit it. She acts like you're punishing her for no reason. I leaned back against the wall, staring up at the fluorescent lights. So she's embarrassed that I'm embarrassed, I said. Lily snorted softly, then immediately looked guilty for laughing. Yeah, she admitted. We sat in silence for a moment, and I felt something shifting inside me. Not anger, not even sadness. Something like clarity sharpening into focus. Because the more Lily talked, the more I realized my disappearance was doing exactly what I needed it to do. It wasn't just protecting me, it was revealing the truth. My mom didn't know how to love me unless I made her look good. And now that I was gone, she didn't know how to explain that to people. She couldn't brag. She couldn't pretend. She couldn't rewrite me into a version that fit her story. So she was scrambling. Lily glanced at me. You look different. I blinked. Different how? Lily's eyes moved over me slowly, like she was comparing me to the last version of me she remembered. You look tired, she said, but not like before. You look like you're actually yours. I swallowed hard, because that was exactly what it felt like. For years, I'd lived like I belonged to my family's narrative. Like my life was a supporting role in my mom's story of being a proud mother of successful children. Now, for the first time, I felt like I belonged to myself. Lily's voice dropped. Can I tell you something? I nodded. She hesitated, then said it in a rush. I don't think I want what Mom wants for me. I turned to look at her fully. What do you mean? Lily's hands trembled slightly as she spoke. She keeps talking about law school like it's already decided, like it's not even a choice. Like my whole life is just the next trophy. My chest tightened. Is that why you're here? Lily nodded. I signed up for a program in communications and digital media. Just one class at first. I wanted to see if I liked it. And I do. I really do. I stared at her. And suddenly, the hallway didn't just feel like a reunion. It felt like a crack forming in the family's perfect wall. A crack my mom didn't know existed yet. Lily looked down. I didn't tell Mom because she'd freak out. She'd say it's not prestigious enough, that it's not impressive. Her voice wavered. And then, she whispered, I saw what she did to you, and I realized, if I don't perform the way she wants, she'll do it to me too. Maybe not the same way, but she'll do it. My throat tightened. Because Lily wasn't just apologizing, she was waking up, and that was bigger than any revenge fantasy. I leaned closer, my voice gentle. Lily, listen to me. You don't have to repeat her cycle. You don't have to become a version of yourself that makes her comfortable. Lily nodded, eyes wet. I know. I don't know how to be brave like you. I let out a breath. Brave. If she only knew how terrified I'd been. I wasn't brave at first, I admitted. I was just done. Lily's gaze flicked to my notebook peeking out of my bag. Are you okay? She asked quietly. That question, so simple, so normal, hit me like a punch. Because nobody in my family had asked me that. Not Mark. Not Emma. Not my mom. Only Lily. And suddenly, I felt tears prick at my eyes. I blinked hard. I'm trying, I said. I'm trying to be. Lily nodded, like she understood. Like she really did. Then she asked the question I knew was coming, the one that sat heavy between us like a stone. Are you ever coming back? She whispered. The hallway seemed to go quieter, like even the building was listening. I stared straight ahead, thinking, I could have lied. I could have said, maybe someday. I could have said, when Mom apologizes. But the truth was complicated. Because even if my mom apologized, I didn't know if I could ever unsee what she'd done. I didn't know if I could ever sit at that table again without feeling like I was begging. So I answered honestly. I don't know, I said softly. Right now, I need distance more than I need a seat at that table. Lily swallowed, nodding slowly. I miss you, she said. My chest tightened. I miss you too, I admitted. But I don't miss that. Lily gave a small, shaky smile. That makes sense. A professor walked past us, fumbling with keys, nodding politely. The normal world kept moving around us. Lily stood up slowly, adjusting her backpack. She looked like she wanted to say more, like she had 1,000 questions trapped behind her teeth. Before she walked away, she reached out and squeezed my hand. For what it's worth, she said, voice trembling. I think what you're doing is brave, and I'm proud of you. I stared at her, stunned. Proud. That word, coming from someone in my family, felt unfamiliar. It felt healing. Lily turned to go, then paused. Mom doesn't understand what she started, she said quietly. She thinks you're just throwing a tantrum. I shook my head. No, I said. I'm not throwing a tantrum. I looked Lily in the eyes. I'm ending a pattern. Lily nodded. Like that sentence settled something inside her. Then she walked away down the hallway, disappearing into the crowd of students. I watched her go, my heart heavy and full at the same time. And as I turned toward my classroom door, my mind was spinning with one clear thought. My mom's successful kids-only dinner hadn't just erased me. It had exposed something. It had started a chain reaction she couldn't control. Because now Lily had seen it. And once someone sees the truth, they can't unsee it. Not really. I took a deep breath, pushed open the classroom door, and stepped back into my new life, wondering, for the first time, not if my mom would ever be proud of me, but if she would ever survive the consequences of the story she'd tried so hard to write without me. After I ran into Lily at the college, I expected the emotional whiplash to be the hardest part. I thought the hardest part would be resisting the urge to call my mom just to prove I wasn't a monster. I thought the hardest part would be the loneliness on holidays, or the random waves of guilt that hit you when you walk past a Mother's Day card display in a grocery store. But the truth is, the hardest part wasn't the silence. The hardest part was realizing how much of my life had been shaped around someone else's approval, and how much space opened up when I stopped chasing it. Weeks passed. Then, months. And the longer the group chat stayed muted, the more my life started to feel like it belonged to me. Work became less of a punishment and more of a foundation. I started seeing the factory differently, not as a dead end, but as a place where I had real skills. I knew every inch of that line. I knew the sound a machine made right before it jammed. I knew which new hires were struggling just by the way they held their wrists. I knew how to keep the whole place moving when everything wanted to fall apart. And for the first time, I wasn't doing it to earn my mom's pride. I was doing it because I was good at it. I kept going to night classes. I kept showing up, even when I was exhausted, even when my eyes burned from lack of sleep, even when my hands were still stiff from the cold. I sat in the front row now. I asked questions. I took notes, like my life depended on it. Mia started coming with me some nights, mostly because she said she needed a reason to stop doom scrolling after work. We became those annoying people who whispered about homework in the hallway and celebrated passing quizzes like we were winning awards. And slowly, something changed inside me. Not loudly, not dramatically, but steadily, like a bruise fading. Then one night, after a long shift, I came home and did something I hadn't planned to do at all. I opened the Notes app on my phone. At first, it was just a rant. A messy, angry paragraph about blue-collar work. About how people like my mom treated it like a stain. About how you could sacrifice everything for your family and still be the one they were ashamed of. I typed faster than I could think. The words poured out like I'd been holding them in my throat for years. I wrote about the barbecue where my mom laughed. I wrote about the way she introduced me like I was a temporary embarrassment. I wrote about the Mother's Day text, the exact words, "successful kids only." I wrote about the feeling of watching your name disappear from your own mother's sentence. And in the middle of it, without planning to, I wrote a question that made my hands stop for a second. Does your self-worth depend on the people who refuse to see it? Or can you learn to build it anyway? I stared at that line, my heart pounding. Because it wasn't just about my mom. It was about me. It was about every moment I had let her define what success meant. It was about how small I had made myself just to stay lovable in her eyes. I should have deleted it. I should have closed the app and gone to bed. Instead, I remembered something Mia had told me once during lunch break, when I was complaining about my family, and she was chewing her sandwich like she'd heard it all before. "You know you could write," she'd said casually. "Like really write, not just vent, you should put it somewhere." At the time, I'd rolled my eyes. But that night, I didn't. I copied the whole thing into an anonymous blog platform Mia had shown me. I didn't use my name. I didn't mention Riverton. I didn't mention my mom's church. I didn't even mention my siblings' real jobs. I changed small details, the way you do when you're trying to protect people who never protected you. Then, I stared at the title box. My fingers hovered, and I typed, "Successful kids only, when your family invites everyone but you." My stomach flipped. I told myself I was just posting it into the void. I told myself maybe 3 strangers would read it and scroll past. Then, on impulse, I hit publish. The second I did, panic rushed through me. My heart started racing like I'd done something illegal. I tossed my phone onto the couch like it was hot. I paced my apartment. I told myself I was being ridiculous. It was anonymous. It was just a story. It was just words. But words were the one thing my mom had always controlled. My mom could shame me in private. She could erase me in public. She could rewrite me into whatever version of me she wanted. And now, for the first time, I had written my own version down. I went to bed with my phone face down on the counter like it was a secret. The next morning, I woke up and checked the blog out of nervous habit. It had views. Not a lot, but enough to make my stomach drop. A few hundred. Then, by the time I got home from my shift, it was in the thousands. And the comments? The comments were full of strangers saying things that made my throat tighten. I thought I was the only one. My mom did this when I became a mechanic. I got left out of family photos when I worked retail. Cutting contact saved my life. I stared at my screen, blinking hard, because the validation from strangers hit in a way I didn't expect. It wasn't that I needed applause. It was that I needed proof I wasn't crazy. That this kind of pain wasn't small. That being erased wasn't dramatic. It was devastating. Mia found it 3 days later. She texted me a screenshot with one line. "This is you, isn't it?" My heart stopped. I called her immediately, whispering like someone could hear me through the walls. "How did you?" Mia laughed. "Sarah, please. The successful kids only line, that's you. Also, the writing, that's you. Don't panic." "I didn't want anyone to know," I said, voice shaking. "Relax," she replied. "I'm proud of you. And if your mom ever reads it, good. Let her." That sentence made my stomach twist. Because the thought of my mom reading it made me feel like I was 12 again, waiting to be punished. But the internet didn't care about my fear. The post kept spreading. Someone shared it on a page about toxic family dynamics. Then someone else reposted it on Facebook with the caption, "Parents, don't do this." Then it made its way into the exact circles I'd been trying not to think about. The kind of circles my mom lived in. The kind of circles where people love to talk about family values and respect, and how children should honor their parents. The kind of circles where image mattered more than truth. I didn't realize it had reached them until I saw it myself. One night, while scrolling, I noticed a familiar name in the share chain. Mrs. Donnelly, my mom's church friend. She had posted the link with a caption that made my skin go cold. This broke my heart. "If you're a parent, please read this." I stared at her post for a long time. Because if Mrs. Donnelly had it, that meant my mom was going to get it. Maybe not that day, maybe not from that person, but soon. The story was in the water now, and my mom drank from that same well every Sunday. 2 days later, an unknown number called my phone. I watched it ring, my heart pounding. I didn't answer. I let it go to voicemail. A minute later, the voicemail notification popped up. My hands were shaking as I pressed play, and there it was. My mom's voice. Tight, strained. The kind of voice she used when she was trying not to sound angry in case someone was listening. "Sarah, it's Mom." My stomach clenched. "I've been hearing about a story going around online," she continued. "People keep sending it to me saying it sounds familiar." She paused, like she expected me to jump in and apologize. I didn't. Her voice sharpened. "I hope you're not involved in anything that makes our family look bad. We need to talk. Call me back." Then the voicemail ended. I sat there in my apartment, staring at my phone like it had betrayed me. Not once did she say, "Are you okay?" Not once did she say, "Did I hurt you?" Not once did she say, "I'm sorry." Just, "Don't make us look bad." That was her real fear. Not losing me. Losing control of the story. I saved the voicemail. Another receipt. Then I did something else. I opened a folder on my laptop and labeled it, "Proof I'm Not Crazy." Inside, I put the screenshot of the Mother's Day text, the photos from the dinner, the pro and con list, the voicemail, the blog post printed as a PDF. It wasn't for revenge. It was for me. Because I knew how guilt worked. I knew how memory softened edges. I knew there would be nights where I'd miss the idea of a mother and start wondering if I'd overreacted. That folder was my anchor, a reminder of what actually happened, a reminder that I didn't imagine being erased, a reminder that I had finally told the truth. The next day at work, something happened that almost made me laugh from the absurdity of it. Rachel pulled me aside while we were walking the floor. "Hey," she said casually, like she was asking about the schedule. "Random question." I braced myself. She leaned closer. "I read this post online about someone whose mom excluded them from Mother's Day dinner. The author sounded a lot like you." My cheeks went hot. I forced a shrug. "Maybe." Rachel smiled in a way that made my chest ache. "If it was you," she said quietly, "you should know it was powerful. And anyone who can lead on the line and write like that, you're going places, Hayes. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." I swallowed hard. Because that sentence, "don't let anyone tell you otherwise," felt like the opposite of my entire childhood. That night, I sat on my couch, staring at my phone. My mom was blocked. My siblings were blocked. The group chat was muted. But my story was out there. And I realized something that scared me and thrilled me at the same time. I had spent my whole life trying to be included in my family's story. And now, without even trying, I had created a story so real it was making its way back to them. Not as a plea, not as an apology, but as a mirror. And the woman who hated mirrors the most was the one who had spent years pretending I didn't exist. After my mom's voicemail, I told myself that was it. I told myself the story had already done what it needed to do. It had given me language for my pain. It had given strangers something to hold on to. It had made my mother uncomfortable in the only place she truly lived, other people's opinions. That should have been enough. But Mia didn't see it that way. A few days later, during lunch break, she slid into the seat across from me with that look on her face, the one that meant she was about to ruin my peace in the best possible way. She didn't even say hello. She just slapped a flyer down on the table between our sandwiches. "Community Storytelling Night," she announced. "Downtown Riverton. Theme: When Family Crosses the Line." I stared at it like it was a threat. "No," I said immediately. Mia leaned back, chewing thoughtfully. "Yes. I'm not getting on a stage," I told her. "I wrote it anonymously for a reason." Mia grinned. "You wrote it because you were tired of being silent. Don't pretend this is about privacy." I rolled my eyes, but my stomach tightened. Because she wasn't wrong. It was one thing to write behind a screen name. It was another thing to stand under bright lights and say the words out loud, in a room full of real faces. That felt like stepping into a fire. And my mom had trained me my whole life to avoid any flame that might burn her image. Mia tapped the flyer again. "Think about the comments on your post," she said. "Think about how many people said they thought they were alone. What if some of them are here? What if you're the reason someone finally stops apologizing for their boundaries?" I swallowed. Because that part hit. It wasn't just about my mom anymore. It was about what my story represented. About how many people were living in families where love came with terms and conditions, where you were only valued when you were useful or impressive. I stared at the flyer. The event was in a week. Mia's eyes were bright. "Do it," she said softly. "Not for revenge." I wanted to laugh it off. Instead, I heard myself say, "Fine, I'll think about it." Mia's grin widened. "You're doing it." I said I'd think. "You're doing it," she repeated, like she had already decided. That night, I sat on my couch with my laptop open, staring at the registration page. My hands were sweating. I could hear my mom's voice in my head, sharp and horrified. "Why would you air private family business?" I could hear Mark's voice too. "This is dramatic. This is embarrassing." And then, underneath them, I heard another voice. Mine. Quiet. Steady. A little scared. But mine. I typed my name into the sign-up form. Not my full name. Just Sarah. Then I hesitated. Because the moment I hit submit, I wouldn't be able to pretend this was just a private boundary anymore. It would be a public one. I took a breath. And I clicked submit. The week leading up to the event felt like living with a secret under my tongue. I went to work. I went to class. I smiled at Mia, like I wasn't internally spiraling. But every night, I lay in bed, rehearsing sentences in my head. I kept imagining my mom sitting in the audience, arms crossed, face tight with rage. I kept imagining someone from her church recognizing me. I kept imagining my siblings watching, laughing, texting each other about how pathetic I was. But I also imagined something else. I imagined a room full of people who understood, and that image kept me from backing out. The night of the event, I almost didn't go. I stood in my apartment wearing a plain black sweater and jeans, staring at myself in the mirror. My face looked pale. My eyes looked too big. I looked like someone about to confess a crime. Mia texted me. "On my way. Don't you dare bail." I swallowed hard, grabbed my notebook, and left. Downtown Riverton was small, but that night it felt like a different world. The venue was a cozy little place with exposed brick walls, warm string lights, and rows of folding chairs packed close together. There was a tiny stage at the front with a microphone and a stool. The room was full. Not full of people I knew, full of strangers. And somehow, that made it worse and better at the same time. Worse because I couldn't hide behind familiarity. Better because I didn't have to. Mia squeezed my shoulder as we found seats near the front. "You're going to be amazing," she whispered. "I'm going to throw up," I whispered back. She laughed softly. "That's how you know it matters." The event started with a few other storytellers. People talked about siblings stealing inheritances, parents choosing favorites, family members who only called when they needed money. The room laughed in places, went quiet in others, and with every story, my heart beat harder. Because I realized something. I wasn't the only one. I wasn't even close. Then the host looked at the list in his hand and said, "Next up, Sarah." My stomach dropped so fast it felt like my organs shifted. Mia nudged me. "Go," she mouthed. My legs felt numb as I stood up. The walk to the stage was only a few steps, but it felt like walking across a bridge made of glass. I climbed the small steps and sat on the stool. The microphone was cold. My hands were shaking so badly, I had to grip it with both hands. I looked out at the room. Faces. So many faces. Some smiling kindly. Some neutral. Some already teary, like they'd come in carrying their own pain. I swallowed. My mouth was dry. For a second, I couldn't speak. Then I remembered the first line I'd written in my blog post. The one that had made strangers stop scrolling. And I said it out loud. My mom called me embarrassing because I work in a factory. The room shifted. Not loudly, but I felt it, like a wave moving through the chairs. A murmur rippled, soft and stunned. I took a breath, and then I told them everything. I told them about Riverton, about the frozen food plant, about the smell of garlic powder and cold metal, about my dad dying and me staying behind while my siblings chased degrees and titles. I told them about the barbecue where my mom laughed when someone asked what I did. I told them about how she couldn't say the word factory. I told them about Mother's Day. I recited the exact words. Mother's Day dinner. Successful kids only. I watched faces flinch like I'd slapped them. I told them about refreshing the group chat, waiting for anyone to say my name. I told them about the video call I let ring until it died. I told them about the text afterward. "You're always part of the family. Always part of the family. Just not proud enough to be seen." The room was silent. So silent I could hear the faint hum of the lights above us. Halfway through my story, my voice started to shake. Not because I was weak, because I was finally saying it without minimizing it. I told them about my pro and con list. I told them about the screenshots, the locked album, the folder I labeled "Proof I'm Not Crazy." I told them about blocking my mom and my siblings, and how the silence afterward felt like stepping out of a storm. Then I told them about the blog post, about how it went viral, about the voicemail where my mom didn't ask if I was okay, only if I was making the family look bad. And when I said that part, someone in the audience actually whispered, "Oh my God." I paused. My throat tightened, and I looked out at the room and asked the question that had once gutted me. Have you ever looked at your own family and realized you're only loved on their terms? I saw heads nodding, dozens of them. A woman in the second row wiped tears off her cheeks. A man near the back stared at the floor like he couldn't look up. And in that moment, I felt something inside me crack open. It was like breathing underwater my whole life and suddenly hitting air. I finished my story with the truth I'd learned the hard way. "I used to believe family was a debt," I said, my voice steadier now. "That if they gave me life, I had to give them my silence. But I don't believe that anymore. I can love where I come from and still walk away from the parts that are killing me." When I stepped off the stage, my knees almost gave out. Mia grabbed me in a hug so tight it knocked the air out of me. "You did it," she whispered. People came up to me after. Strangers. They hugged me, thanked me, told me pieces of their own stories like we were old friends. One woman squeezed my hand and said, "My mom uninvited me from Christmas because I became a truck driver." I screenshotted her text and kept it for years. Hearing you say it out loud, I feel less crazy. I swallowed hard, because that was exactly what I'd needed too. On the bus ride home, I sat by the window, my forehead resting against the glass, exhausted in a way that felt clean. I opened my phone and checked my blog without thinking. My heart stuttered. A bigger page had shared my post. A page with hundreds of thousands of followers. They had pulled the phrase "successful kids only" and used it like a headline. The caption read, "The successful kids only mom is why so many of us are in therapy." The comments were a war zone, but most of them were on the side of kids like me. Then, halfway down the thread, I saw a name that made my breath catch. Lily Hayes. My sister. She had commented publicly. "Sometimes the successful kids are just the ones who learned how to perform. The others are just trying to survive." I stared at her comment for a long time, my chest tight. Because Lily wasn't just supporting me. She was stepping out of my mom's script. And I knew, with a certainty that made my hands tremble, that my mother had seen it too. The next day, Lily texted me directly. "Saw your talk on someone's story. It was you, right?" I replied, "Yes." There was a long pause. Then Lily wrote, "Mom saw it too. She's not handling it well. People at church are talking. She says you're airing family business." I stared at the message. And for the first time since Mother's Day, I didn't feel fear. I didn't feel guilt. I felt something quieter. Balance. Because I hadn't lied. I hadn't used her name. I hadn't posted her photo. I had protected her identity more than she had ever protected my dignity. And now, she was finally facing the one thing she could never control: the truth. I set my phone down and looked around my apartment, the small, messy, imperfect space I'd built for myself. And I realized something that surprised me. Knowing my story had cracked my mom's perfect facade didn't feel like cheap revenge. It didn't feel like triumph. It felt like consequences. And consequences, I was learning, were sometimes the closest thing to justice you ever get. And somehow, it was enough. A few years slipped by in a way that didn't feel dramatic from the inside. There was no big explosion, no screaming phone call, no moment where my mom showed up at my door crying in the rain like a movie. There were just ordinary days: work, class, sleep, coffee with Mia, nights where I wrote until my hands cramped, mornings where I woke up and realized I hadn't thought about my mother in hours. My phone contacts list got shorter, but my world got bigger. I moved up again at the factory, this time into a role that had me traveling between plants. I wasn't just supervising one line anymore. I was helping train new supervisors, troubleshooting breakdowns, teaching teams how to fix problems without blaming each other. I had a beat-up company laptop, a suitcase that stayed half-packed, and a calendar that didn't revolve around family holidays. And I kept writing. The blog that started as a late-night vent became something real. People came back. They checked in. They told me their stories. They thanked me for saying the words they'd been too afraid to say out loud. Sometimes I wrote about boundaries. Sometimes I wrote about class and dignity. Sometimes I wrote about small moments at work that would have meant nothing to my mom, but meant everything to me. Like the day a new hire told me, "You're the first boss I ever had who didn't talk down to me." That sentence sat in my chest like warmth. It was proof that I wasn't just surviving. I was becoming someone. Every so often, I'd get updates about my family through other people. A coworker who still went to my mom's church would mention hearing my last name in a prayer request. A mutual acquaintance would post a photo of Mark and Emma at some event, smiling like nothing had ever cracked. Lily and I texted now and then, keeping it light unless one of us had a bad day and needed the other to say, "No, you're not crazy. This really happened." From Lily, I learned my mom hadn't let the story go. She changed churches for a while, then went back. She complained about how judgmental people are these days. She told her friends she was a mother who had done her best. She said I had misunderstood. She said I was ungrateful. She never said, as far as Lily knew, I hurt my daughter. Not once. And that should have been my answer. But life has a way of testing your boundaries, right when you start trusting them. It was a Tuesday night when Lily called me. Not texted. Called. Her voice was tight, the way it gets when something big has happened, and she's trying to keep herself together. "Sarah," she said, and I could hear her swallowing. "Mom wants your number." My stomach tightened immediately. I sat down on the edge of my couch, my suitcase half packed beside me for another work trip, and stared at the wall. "She wants my number," I repeated slowly. Lily hesitated. "Yeah." I already knew what that meant. My mom didn't call when she missed me. She called when she needed something. I took a breath. "Why?" Lily sighed, and the sound was heavy. "She's sick," she said. "Not like dying right now, but she's having health issues. High blood pressure, stress. She missed work. She has hospital bills." My chest tightened, not with love, but with that old reflex. Guilt. The reflex my mom had installed in me like an alarm system. Lily kept going. "The roof is leaking. The house needs repairs. She's behind on payments." There it was. The real reason. And then Lily said the sentence that made my stomach drop. She heard you're doing well now. I closed my eyes. I pictured my mom sitting in the living room of my childhood home, surrounded by the same old furniture, the same framed photos of Mark and Emma and Lily. I pictured her complaining to her friends, saying she didn't understand why I was so cruel. I pictured her telling herself she was the victim, and for a moment, I felt that familiar urge rise up. The urge to fix it, the urge to rescue her, the urge to prove I was still a good daughter, because guilt is sneaky. It doesn't care how many times someone hurt you, it only cares that you were trained to respond when someone says family. I opened my mouth to speak, but Lily beat me to it. Before you say anything, she said quickly, I want you to know, she's not asking because she misses you. My throat tightened. Lily's voice cracked. She's saying if you really cared about family, you'd step up. She keeps saying you owe her, that you took everything from her when you disappeared. I let out a slow breath. A bitter laugh tried to escape, but it didn't make it all the way out. I stared at the floor, and in that moment, I saw it so clearly I almost felt calm. My mom had turned motherhood into a business transaction. She gave birth, therefore she owned me. She raised me, therefore she could humiliate me. She was struggling, therefore I was required to save her. And she still didn't understand what she'd done. She still didn't understand why I left. Lily was quiet for a moment, then she asked softly, What do you want to do? I blinked. Because no one in my family had ever asked me that. Not about something like this. They didn't ask what I wanted. They told me what I was supposed to do. My throat tightened. I don't know, I admitted. Lily exhaled. I think you do. I swallowed. I could hear the fear in her voice, like she was terrified she was about to become the messenger in a war. So I asked her something I never thought I'd ask. What do you think I should do? I said quietly. Lily was silent for a long time. Then she said something that made my eyes burn. I think you already did more than anyone knows, she whispered. You stayed when Dad died. You worked nights. You kept the mortgage paid. You covered bills you couldn't even afford. Mom never counted any of that when she wrote that Mother's Day text. My chest tightened. Lily continued, voice steadier now. I don't think you owe her a rescue now. She's going to call you cruel for that, but I don't think it's cruel. I think it's consequences. Consequences. Hearing my baby sister say that word about our mother felt like hearing a door click shut in my head that had been stuck half open for years. It didn't slam. It just closed. Gently but firmly. I took a slow breath. Tell her she can have a message, I said. But not my number. Lily's voice trembled. What message? I stared at my hands. Tell her I hope she takes care of her health, I said. Tell her I hope she finds support. Tell her she deserves help as a person. But tell her I'm not stepping back into that role. Lily let out a shaky breath. She's going to say you abandoned her. I swallowed. She still has 3 kids, I said. She has Mark. She has Emma. She has you. She has her church friends. I didn't take everything from her. I paused, feeling my voice grow steadier. I just stopped letting her take everything from me. A week later, a small package showed up at my apartment. No return address. But the handwriting on the label made my stomach twist. My mom's handwriting. It was the same handwriting that used to sign permission slips. The same handwriting that wrote grocery lists and sticky notes on the fridge. For a second, I just stared at the box like it was alive. Then I carried it inside and set it on my kitchen table. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside was a small jewelry box, one I recognized instantly. It was mine. A little box with my initials on it from when I was a kid. And underneath it, a letter. I unfolded the paper slowly, bracing myself. The letter was exactly what you would expect from someone who had never learned how to apologize without twisting it. She never wrote, I'm sorry. Instead, she wrote, I know I wasn't a perfect mother, but you misunderstood so much of what I tried to do. She wrote, I only wanted the best for you. She wrote, you have hurt me deeply by taking our private issues and making them public. She wrote about church, about whispers, about how people looked at her differently now. Then, near the end, she wrote the sentence that made my stomach go cold. After everything I did for you, the least you could do is help me in my time of need. I stared at that line for a long time. because there was a time when that sentence would have worked. There was a time when I would have grabbed my phone, called her, cried, begged her to see me, offered money I barely had, thrown myself back into the role of the daughter who fixes everything. But that version of me was gone. I set the letter down carefully, like it was something sharp. Then I did something I'd learned to do over the last few years. I grabbed my notebook. The same notebook that held my pro and con list. The same notebook that held the printed blog post. The same notebook that held my small victories. On a clean page, I wrote, "Here is what is real," and I forced myself to list facts instead of feelings. I did not post her name. I did not show her face. I told my story in a way that protected her identity more than she ever protected my dignity. I did not cause her health problems. I did not make people whisper. Her choices did that. I spent years supporting this family in ways no one ever acknowledged. That work counted, even if she pretended it didn't. I read those lines out loud to myself until they felt solid, until they felt stronger than guilt. Then I folded the letter back up and put it in the jewelry box. I didn't throw it away. I didn't burn it. I didn't turn it into a revenge post. I didn't need to, because the truth was already written, and I was done begging her to read it. The only thing I sent back was one short text through Lily, who agreed to pass it along word for word. It said, "I hope you take care of your health and find the support you need. I'm not able to step back into this role. I wish you peace." That was it. No explanation. No debate. No reopening old wounds so she could poke them again. Just a boundary stated calmly, like the weather. A few days later, Lily texted me. She cried. Lily wrote, "Then she called you ungrateful. Then she told her friends you abandoned her. But she stopped asking for your number." I stared at that message for a long time. And I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel victorious. I felt heavy, and sad, and strangely calm. Because there is a kind of grief that comes with choosing your own peace over a relationship you spent your whole life trying to fix. People like to put a bow on stories like this. They like to say, "And then she never thought about it again and everything was perfect." That's not how it works. I still have nights where I miss the idea of a mom more than I miss the person. I still have moments where I see a mother and daughter laughing in a store, and my chest aches. I still have memories of my childhood that make me want to rewind time and beg for a different outcome. But those feelings don't cancel out reality. They just make me human. A while after the letter, I wrote one last post about that chapter. Not to drag her. Not to punish her. Just to close the loop. I wrote about how it's possible to hope someone gets better without volunteering to be their medicine. I wrote about how you can love someone and still not let them have access to the parts of you they've already proven they will harm. I ended it with the truest thing I had learned. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for yourself, and weirdly, for them, is to step out of a role that was destroying you. Love doesn't always mean access. Forgiveness doesn't always mean reunion. Family shouldn't be built on humiliation and fear, but on respect and choice. And you are allowed to build a new definition of family with people who don't need you to bleed to prove your loyalty. That night, after I hit publish, I didn't feel like I'd won. I felt finished. Like I had finally told the whole story. Not just the parts that made me look good or her look bad, but the parts that showed how complicated it really was. I walked out onto my tiny balcony and looked at the distant lights of the factory glowing on the horizon. That same building where I once read a message that said "successful kids only" had become the place where I finally learned something my mother never taught me. My worth does not need her stamp of approval. And if you're standing where I once stood, torn between guilt and freedom, let me ask you the question that changed my life. If someone only wants you when you're useful, is that love? Or is it just another way of being erased? If there's one truth hiding underneath this entire story, it's this. The deepest wounds in a family don't always come from shouting. Sometimes they come from silence, from being quietly erased, overlooked, or treated like you only matter when you make someone else look good. Sarah's story isn't just about a Mother's Day dinner. It's about what happens when love becomes conditional, when a parent turns pride into a weapon and success into a requirement for belonging. And the most powerful part of her revenge wasn't anger or public humiliation. It was her decision to disappear peacefully, rebuild her life, and stop begging for a seat at a table that never respected her. Because in the end, the real victory wasn't making her mother regret it. The real victory was Sarah finally believing she deserved better. If this story hit close to home, you're not alone. And you're not dramatic for wanting respect. Thank you for listening to Revenge Tale Network, where we tell emotionally powerful stories that help you reflect, heal, and grow. If you want more stories like this, stories about self-worth, boundaries, and quiet justice, please subscribe, like, and stay with us. Your support helps this channel travel farther than you think.